And hello, everybody, and welcome back to Magical Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ian Cahoon. And before we get started tonight, I do want to just get you guys to remember to like, share, and subscribe. I have access to some numbers that tells me that way more you guys that are watching this show are watching it without subscribing. But there's a little bit of a perk to subscribing to the show. You don't actually miss episodes if you subscribe and hit that like button. So thank you. Thank you very much for enjoying the show. Take that next plunge. All right. With that said, don't forget magicaljourneypodcast.com for all of the information on the show and other social media events as well. Uh, so tonight, uh, I have for you guys a really special episode, and we're going to get right into it. Uh, my guest tonight, you know her if you know much at all about high strangeness, about ufology, about if you've heard about Skinwalker Ranch. There's so many ways to know my guest tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, IKatie Paige. Hey.
Hey, Friday.
So it is Friday, and this is Friday Night Live, right?
Right.
So, Katie, before we get started, just tell people where they can find you, because I think a lot of people know who you are, but they may not know where to locate you online.
Well, first off, thank you, Daniel, for having me on the Magical Journey podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Really, there's three places people could go to find me. You can find me at Katie, Katie Paige, PAIGE.net. That's my personal website. And then I have the Rocky Mountain Ranch Research.org website. You can find me there as well. And then also I have a YouTube channel that I've neglected for a month now. And I'm like, my numbers are starting to tank, but I do have a YouTube channel, and I've tried to go on location at some of these high strangeness areas and kind of take people. Before I was like sitting behind, doing this, which is great too. I enjoy doing this, but I thought it'd be fun to take people along on some investigations that I've gone on. And you can find that at Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with IKatie Paige on YouTube.
Wow, yeah.
I'll get something up soon. I need to get back, get busy on that, but
it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I don't know how you guys all do it. And the ones that do it every single night, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work.
Look, when I get to the point where I can do it every single night, I'll go there. But right now I have to do a real job on top of this. So,
yeah.
So Katie, a lot of people that follow you know your story, but for those that don't, let's talk for a minute about how you really got started, where your experiences started out, and if that was how you got this path that you're on now started, then clue them in, let them know what's happening.
Yeah, I think your podcast name says a lot, really, Magical Journey. And I think for most of us, it's been that. So it's perfect name for it. I mean, like so many people, we all, or a lot of people that I talk to have experienced things that just kind of fall outside the typical normal life experiences. And for me, that started at a pretty early age. And then back in the day too, I compartmentalized different experiences into different boxes of like paranormal things, right? The ghosts and the shadow figures and all of those things that happened when I was younger, living in different haunted locations and things like that. My mom started dating a gentleman in the 1970s that owned a ranch in Elbert County, Colorado. And my mom worked as a computer operator for United Airlines. So we moved out to Colorado from Illinois because of that reason. and she started dating this guy that owned this interesting ranch. So it's important for your listeners to understand I did not live there full time, thank goodness, or I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, because the 3 boys who did live there full time all moved out of the state of Colorado, are still very traumatized, PTSD from all the events that happened at this location, predated the Skinwalker Ranch by over 15 years. I never knew anybody knew anything about the location. I never knew it was investigated. We were kind of told never to talk about it. And even when I did, I'm 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and you're trying to tell your little friends about all these, cattle mutilations and strange sounds and cryptids, and they just think you're kind of nuts anyway. So you just learn to shut up really quick. So, I didn't talk about it. My sister was also there, experienced things. She was on season 3 with me on Beyond Skinwalker. My mom experienced things. So what happened was, since this was a small town in Elbert County, the 2 younger sons lived with us during the week to go to a larger school district in the state of Colorado. It's a Cherry Creek School District. It's one of the best school districts in the state. So they lived with us during the week, and then we'd commute back and forth on the weekends so they can visit their mom, help on the ranch, blah, blah, blah. So to put this in a little box, fast forward, you go through school, you get married, start raising a family. And I had all these unanswered questions about what all that was about. This is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start out there in Elbert County as an investigative journalist. So here I was, not knowing anybody knew anything about the ranch in my childhood. And I learned about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, joined MUFON, came right in as a field investigator, started just kind of getting my feet wet and investigating other people's cases. And I came across this book in a bookstore called Hunt for the Skinwalker. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Skinwalker Ranch wasn't a series. And I read the back of the book and I'm like, oh, this sounds like my childhood. I wonder if there's any commonalities or similarities. And I opened the chapter titled Other Hotspots and started reading about a ranch in Colorado. And I'm like, holy beep. This has to be the ranch of my childhood, because I knew like the strange family dynamics. My mom was dating this guy and, and they weren't technically divorced yet. And she had a boyfriend and then the 3 boys. And I just knew the weird dynamics of the situation. And so in this book, it stated that there were 3 PhDs, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, Peter Van Arsdale, and John Durr, who is a seismologist, PhD, and others that investigated the ranch. So I was just like mind blown, calling my mom on the phone, calling my sister, you're not going to believe this. And thankfully for me, Dr. Leo Sprinkle lived in Laramie, Wyoming. So it was a quick, 3-hour drive for me to go get his archives, talk to Dr. Sprinkle. And very quickly, I got the original briefing document on the ranch, both, the one where they used the pseudonyms, which by the way, were really close to the real names. And it's just been 15 plus years now of talking with people, doing investigations, sending FOIA requests. Because my question always was, how much of this was actual paranormal, unexplained activity, and how much of this was like Black access government projects? And we can get into that a little bit.
Right, because there was so much. So we're familiar with some of the things that have been experienced at another location here in the South that is very similar in some ways. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that both of you have talked about, and by both of you, I mean you and Trey Hudson, orbs was definitely one of the things on the list. Seeing craft of some sort was one of the things on the list there of things that are kind of mutual. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that are common between what you experienced and what has happened in some of these other places.
Mm-hmm. And that's really where I started. I mean, just trying to look at all these different locations and, and getting to know people even in the United Kingdom. So this is global. This is not just a United States phenomena. Mm-hmm. And Trey Hudson, who's a great friend of mine, and I've been out on investigations there at the Meadows with him and his team twice. Both times we've experienced very, very unexplained things going on. Some things are common to the Rocky Mountain Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch and other locations, and some things are not. One of the weirdest things that we both have in common, but also different, if that makes any sense, are these strange boxes that we're seeing. Strange sounds, orbs, paranormal things for sure in both locations. That seems to be, and all the locations has this paranormal element, a little bit of the cryptids. One thing that the Meadows didn't have were the Rocky Mountain Ranch, or it was known as Clearview Ranch back in the day. Then I was like, okay, I'm just going to disclose where the location is. It's in Elbert County in Colorado. But they didn't have the mutilations out there in the Meadows project. So that's one thing that's a bit different. But I love the work that Trey and his team are doing. Trey just came out with another great book, and he actually breaks it down on a graph in his new book. What are commonalities as far as, the strange sounds and things like that from some of the well-known hotspots for high strangeness.
So, and I say all that to kind of bring us to a place where we can understand what a little bit of tonight better, because what we're going to be talking about, and what I've been talking about a lot lately on the show, and we even touched on a little bit in The Form of the Forbidden, is a very complex situation. But as you said, not so uncommon in that it is global. It doesn't just happen on Skinwalker Ranch. It didn't just happen at Clearwater. It's not just happening at the Meadows. While these spots are concentrated and obviously have some significance, I guess is the best way I can put it. What is your take on these pinpoints?
Yeah, a lot of things have been kind of looked at and discussed, from ley lines and things like that. But one of the very first things I did is I took, and I would say 90% of them fall into this category of being highly magnetic area. So I went to the U.S. Geological Magnetic Map, and I looked at places like Sedona. Sedona is like, so when a location is highly magnetized, it's a really light shade of pink. So you have, Sedona, Arizona, Marley Woods, highly, Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, the Elbert County, Clearview, Rocky Mountain Ranch of Colorado, and even in the UK, highly magnetic. San Luis Valley, where the Snippy the Horse event took place, it's highly magnetic in a really concentrated area, so it's really anomalous magnetically. But also, David Pilates in his Missing 401, the UFO Connection, he talks about aquifers. And there was an interesting case out of Medicine Bow, Wyoming in 1974 that involved a box and, an alien and all these kind of high strangeness things also. And it's highly magnetic as well. So there's something to that. And even within the paranormal world, you hear about, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. You have highly magnetized area. You have these waters or aquifers underground. So right where this ranch sits. And also it's important to understand the ranch itself of Rocky Mountain Ranch is 60 acres. But the phenomenon was really affecting all of Elbert County. So it wasn't just located on the ranch itself, very much like, Skinwalker Ranch. It's the whole all that area right there, the Mesa, Archuleta Mesa and Dulce as well. It's very active. So it's not just kind of centrally located. It's this whole area. And so we have certain geological aspects too of crystals and granite and things like that. So you put all these three things together, plus then you add the folklore of the areas, and you hear that with the, it's the Ute tribes and the Cheyenne and the Comanche and all that. So you take in all these four elements, and I think it creates something that either allows us to interact with the phenomena or see it more easily than maybe other locations, or it's attracting the phenomena to be there. Like Mount Shasta and things they're doing on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch too. They're looking at, the rocks and the magnetism and the water. And I think they're right. I think they're on course for that.
So James would ask, what are the chances of these places being connected with underground caverns?
That's one of the very first things reported. And, as soon as John Schuessler was one of the founding fathers for MUFON, and he gave me the briefing document. And one of the very first things the adults reported out there when they bought the ranch were like bangs and sounds and hums, very similar to the Taos hum. And they could never identify where these sounds were coming from. And that's where my mind went first, where, are they digging underground? Obviously we have tunnels all through the United States, and Colorado is particularly interesting because we have here in Colorado Springs, I'm right behind Pikes Peak right now. I'm up in the mountains behind Pikes Peak. We have NORAD and the Air Force Academy and Fort Carson. And in getting the briefing document, and that's why I said we know there was a military presence out there in the 70s. That were aware of what was happening at Rocky Mountain Ranch. So much so, there was a whole study done right here. It's called The Choppers and the Choppers. And that was another phenomenon happening where all these marked out, this military presence of all these blacked out coppers, and were they related to the animal mutilation deaths and things like that. So there's no question that there was a military presence out there on the property. And underground tunneling is something I've thought a lot about, even with the Snippy the Horse case and Mount Blanca and the Dulce base. Are they tunneling from military installations out? Now, at the time, it was Stapleton Airport, but I do believe, perhaps already DIA was in the works, and there's a lot of mysteries around the Denver International Airport too. So that is a strong possibility.
Right. It is no coincidence that you've already mentioned two of the three areas that I pinpoint in conversation frequently, which is Sedona and Mount Shasta.
Yeah.
There is what I call the vortex triangle, which includes Mount Shasta, Sedona, and Asheville, North Carolina.
Interesting.
All three areas are very intense vortex areas. Asheville is sort of the zenith of that, the pinnacle of it, the point of that particular area. And you were kind of within that, almost in the center, in a sense.
Yeah, there's another location too, and not a lot of people are aware of. And I came across this while I was heading up a team of people in MUFON. It was called the Mars team, and we took all the cases, which was like over 10,000, before their case management system went online. So these are all the old paper files, and we redacted all the personal information so we can get them out to the public. I think it's important to share research and data. And in that, I came across a case called the Ohio Pile creature case, and it checked all the boxes. And this is in Ohio Pile, Pennsylvania. Police were called, cryptids, orbs, UFO sightings, all of it, the strange noises, and it was really intriguing. So I checked the magnetism of Ohio Pile. It too is highly magnetic and checks all the boxes. So they're scattered all over the place. And of course, I'm going crazy. I'm putting pins in Google Maps and trying to triangulate and all that kind of good stuff, And yeah, there's certainly something to all this. And I do think it's some sort of interdimensional portal activity. And why I say that is that very first time on Beyond Skinwalker season 1, that was my first time back on the ranch since I was a kid. And I'm out with the team, and I knew there was going to be snow, but this was like heavy blizzard, like crazy. I was not prepared. And I was walking the team back to where I had this daytime box encounter when I was younger. And what's interesting is it never made the episode. They haven't even touched on the boxes. I think it's just kind of maybe too out there or strange or whatever. So that didn't even make the episode. But why we're walking back to the tree line behind the ranch house, it was like, it was snowing so hard that our footprints were getting covered up really fast. But here, right in front of me in the blanket of snow, were these bipedal tracks in the snow, pretty wide stride. Then what was strange is they disappeared and reappeared and then disappeared. So to me, it felt like something was curious. Like all these decades are going by. Nobody is ever back here at night. And all of a sudden you have a film crew with flashlights and headlamps, and like something was curious as to why we were there. That's what it felt like. And came up and walked, and I don't know, it felt like something was underground. And what's interesting, right there at the ranch, two major aquifers come together. So you have the Denver and the Dawson, which means there's different water tables underground, which could open up, begs the questions, are there caverns under there? Or voids where something could be tunneling or living or coming in and out of. I don't know. It's just a theory I have. Who knows?
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked, you mentioned Snippy a couple of times on here, and Snippy even came up in a conversation last week on the Form of the Forbidden. If you guys saw that, if you have not, go back and check that out on Eye of Jupiter's channel for last week. Before we get into, because there's no way of talking about Snippy and what occurred with this case without some graphic conversation, unfortunately.
Right.
We'll try to keep it as tolerable as possible for those of you that are sensitive. But I'm going to warn you now that we're about to enter some kind of gruesome conversation, and there is some material that we're going to present here that may be a bit much for people that are sensitive. So do be aware that a couple of the photos I'm going to pull up, if you are not really okay with that material, you may want to just like face another way for a moment. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's really sad and unfortunate, these poor animals. And it's such a mystery. And for a very long time, I kind of steered away from the animal deaths. Number one, we still have some really good investigators that have been really researching and studying this for a long time, 50 years, and that's what's crazy about it too, right? 50 years, we're not any closer to the truth than we were then. Linda Moulton House started out back in the 70s tackling the animal mutilations. Christopher O'Brien has done, I have some of his books here. He's done a lot, and unfortunately we lost him recently, but Mysterious Valley, San Luis Valley is still very active. He did Enter the Valley and did a deep dive on the Snippy case. And Chuck Zukowski is another one that's done a lot of work with the animal mutilation. So it was kind of like, it's being handled. It's kind of gruesome. It's sad. I just didn't want to dive deep into it, but there's no way to really research the Rocky Mountain Ranch and not tackle the animal deaths. And so 3 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Kerry King came up to me and introduced himself, or reached out to me and introduced himself. And he is the descendant of Nellie King, who owned Snippy. Snippy was the very first, it happened in 1967. And this was before we had internet and before viral was viral. Snippy went viral around the world. The very first recognized animal mutilation death to a 3-year-old male gelding colt named Snippy. And what ended up happening, so they have an event out in the San Luis Valley, and they actually have an event next month. And I hope to see people out there. So you can, tickets are available. It's Snippy 2025 event. If you just put that in a Google search, the information will come up. There's a lot of great speakers coming out. There's going to be August 22nd through the 24th in the San Luis Valley. It's kind of a destination spot. It's dark sky territory. And they chose to put the event with no moon. So, I mean, you can almost see the Milky Way just reflected on the ground. That's how dark sky it is. And every year we've been there now, this will be our 3rd year out there in the summertime for this event. We see anomalous UAPs, or especially in and out around Mount Blanca and the Great Sand Dunes. So there's a lot of things to do if you come out for the event. There is the Great Sand Dunes to visit, and it's just a really cool event. It's outdoors, it's fun, it's laid back. It's just a really neat experience. And if you can't make it this year, then next year, because it's super, super neat event. Dr. Shock will be there, Mark D'Antonio, Trey Hudson will be out there, I'll be out there. Ben Moss and Tony Angiola, who I Tony Angiola wrote the book. I co-authored the Snippy book with him. He'll be there, and the Paranormal Rangers will be out there as well. But what's really important about this old Snippy case, two things. One, I love historical cases, and if you're new to ufology or the high strangeness, I think it's so important to look at these historical cases, and there's still so much to be learned from them. What I thought when Carrie asked me to Tony and I to really reopen up this case, and the reason it was reopened is because of Dave Marler and the work that the National UFO Historical Record Center out in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, acquired the lost APRO files. Now, APRO is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, APRO, and they're the ones who did the original investigation on the Rocky Mountain Ranch or Clearview Ranch. And they're the ones who are out there for the Snippy the Horse case back in 1967. Well, the APRO files went missing for over 37 years. Nobody had access to them. And a whole wall of the National Historical UFO Record Center, which anybody can go to their website and visit there. And they have original Project Blue Book, APRO, CUFOS, NICAP. It would take you 5 years to just go through and just touch the surface on what David has acquired there. It's an amazing place. So long story short, I go to visit the archives right after they moved it to their new location, and I'm there to selfishly try to get more stuff, all the original APRO stuff from the ranch, and Dave plops down all the Snippy stuff, and there's photos that have never been seen, recordings from the Nellie and Burl and the police and sheriffs, and the Condon committee looked at this case. This is a huge case, but what I didn't know there was all these commonalities to what was going on in Rocky Mountain Ranch, in the San Luis Valley, in the Snippy the Horse case, from hums to boxes to cryptids to evidence on the ground, to this strange tool Nellie found in the broken Chico brush, which was very similar to the Lonnie Zamora case, out there in Socorro, New Mexico, to this green ooze, on and on and on. And every day for 6 months, my mind was going, holy, you're kidding me. So yeah, it's an important case. And the original photos that were in that file, which included never seen before photos of Mother Lady and Snippy, the 3-year-old colt. So there was a big controversy. For some reason that we can't understand, Burl Lewis, who was one of the horse owners, decided to change the sex and the name of the horse from Lady to Snippy. And it was this big kind of messy thing, but we now have photos, and one in particular that really is, there was a whole series, there's like 4 or 5 of them, where they show Lady, another horse, Sheba, after Snippy's mutilation. And those 2 horses got really skittish after what happened to Snippy. So there was original maps and drawings and all sorts of information that was never known before about this case. So it's really important to get all that new information that was lost to time out there for people to really take a second look at.
So before I get into possibly showing some other stuff here, let's talk for a moment about this. And here's where unfortunately we're going to get graphic for a moment. So this particular image I'm about to pop up here, this is this what we're talking about with Snippy?
Yeah, so this was one of Snippy's first pictures. So he's still a little bloated, but you can see he's a 3-year-old Appaloosa. You see the Appaloosa markings on him. You can see his back left leg is broken, as if dropped from above. So he had cauterization basically from the shoulders. Obviously, the skin and flesh was removed. Brain cavity was empty, stomach was empty, powder was found there. But what's really fascinating about this too is it was rainy when Snippy went missing. So you could see tracks of like animals and birds. So at the time, originally there were 4 horses pastured on the King Ranch. Smokey, a black, Sheba, Lady the mother, which was a dapple gray, and then 3-year-old Snippy, and Smokey had died the week before the black horse, which what they thought from a rattlesnake bite, but it bit it on the back of the hip, and he was 14 hands high and a 1,200-pound horse. A rattlesnake in the hip wouldn't have killed Smokey. So we had a mysterious horse death the week before Snippy. So that left the 3 horses, Lady, Sheba, and Snippy. So in that file, I sent it to you. There's a map where you could see the horses were like corralled in a zigzag. Do you have that image there? And so because the ground was moist, they could see the tracks of the horse very clearly. So it's as if a light or an orb or something were corralling and spooking the horses in this zigzag pattern. Then you see Snippy milling in a circle like this. Okay. And the other 2 horses, Sheba and Lady, run back to the ranch house. Snippy is then picked up by something. I don't know what. There's no tracks and is dropped from above where he lay. So something spooked these horses. And even after the mutilation of Snippy, Sheba and Lady never acted the same. So I sent you an image too, where one of the investigators, Richmond, was trying to, approach the horses, which were super friendly before this event, would take sugar cubes from you. These are all in the APRO reports. It was fantastic, and in the audio recordings. And after that event, those 2 horses were never the same. They were very spooked after that event. But so many things to this case. Circles and impressions in the ground, which Lonnie Zamora and Don Richmond actually took castings of, and they were comparing it to the Socorro case. The castings were quite different. The sizes, the shapes were different, but at least they were looking at it back in the day. And also, there was a ranch right next door to the King Ranch called Ernest Wellington's Ranch, and it had so many animal mutilations on that particular ranch right next door to the King Ranch that it was dubbed the Dead Cow Ranch. And what's really sad is Ernest Wellington, his daughter actually just reached out to us after the book was written. She's in Australia now and, was confirming a lot of everything in the book. But Ernest Wellington found that strange, mysterious tool in the Chico brush next to the mutilated horse, and he dies a week later. And we don't know if it's related to whatever that green ooze was out of that tool or gizzard-like thing they found in the Chico brush. But yeah, Ernest Wellington passed away a week after Snippy, after handling that. So that is super sad. And again, I don't know if it's related to that tool that they found or it's not, but there's so much to that case.
I'm going through, and now that we've done the big thing, I feel a little more confident showing some of these other photos because they're not as I literally had
so many graphic pictures. I mean, this book alone, like you can get the audiobook and you can, but just the pictures in this that have never been seen before are just kind of worth having the book just for the photos. But they even had cryptid sightings here. That was another thing. So in Elbert County, the Rocky Mountain Ranch, and I witnessed this as well. I was out there in my Jeep with my 2 youngest kids, and this weird like creature went across the road, and I pulled the Jeep over. I'm like, what was that? I thought it was like a beaver or something. It looked like a platypus. It had this long, it looked like a little platypus. So we're investigating the Snippy case, and Nellie King talks about seeing a platypus creature in Mount Blanca at Lake Como. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So it's like cryptids too. And there was a strange track also around Snippy that, I mean, could be a bear. It doesn't look like a Sasquatch, but it's something unusual. Okay, this was in the APRO file. So here, this was a map that they drew right after. Oh, that's another thing. It had sheared off fence posts. So much evidence in this case. So you can kind of see poor Snippy laying there. And then you have these, they put on the map where the Chico brushes were squashed down, where the tool was found, where the horse was milling in a circle right here. It says, milling. I wish I had a pointer, but this, and then he was dropped. What's also interesting in these photographs, his back, it would be his back left leg was also stripped of the flesh and the fur, like the head and the neck, which wasn't really reported upon, but you can clearly see it in some of the photographs. So just so much evidence around this case.
Right.
And
I'm
see,
not
I sent a close-up picture of his back leg, and they even drew at the time where you could see his back right leg was broken, as if dropped from above. And there were no track marks. This was muddy. You could see even a bird track. There were no footprints, horse tracks, nothing. So, it's super mysterious. What could have done this to the horse? And a chapter of the book really goes into some of the theories that were given. At first, the sheriff Lightning Ben, there you could see how they drew it. So the leg looks clearly broken from above, and you could see the Appaloosa spots on there as well. But Ben King thought it was lightning. Clearly, we can rule out lightning. There's been other animals struck by lightning. There was no evidence of lightning around. And another weird theory was this tripod that they said people built this tripod and brought in a big, vat of acid and then hung poor Snippy up and dunked his head. And I mean, just like if that were the case, we would have footprints and track prints and all sorts of things left behind. That's just silly. But the funniest one to me, and there was even a newspaper article about this, that they were radioactive ants that did this to Snippy. And the thing is,
okay.
even before this, all through the valley in 1966 and even prior to that, there's tons of orb sightings, UFO sightings, strange hums like the Taos hum. I mean, it's just the whole valley. That's why there's books written about the mysterious valley, cryptids, and on and on. So, those theories were just kind of, you got to look at it and just shake your head and go, oh boy.
Right. That's the thing, is like oh my God. So I'm kind of going through and looking at this is actually a photo of Snippy before this whole encounter here.
That's the best photo, because when we first found that, Dave Marler and me and Tony, it was just like, oh my gosh, here it is. The never seen photo of poor Snippy as a 3-year-old colt. And what's wonderful about this too, like today we all take thousands of phones or pictures on our cell phones. And so we don't typically go and get them developed very often. But these, they're all like marked on the back, or they had the commentary or written. So it was really neat that they did this. And it said 3-year-old Snippy, or this was 1-month-old Snippy with Mother Lady. So that's his Mother Lady right there. The great dapple gray.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm looking at some of these now, and I'm thinking, wow, this totally brings me back to when we used to actually have to wait on our photos to get developed to see them. But
Yeah, I love that. The one with Lady and Sheba, after I think there's a woman there trying to approach the horses, and you can see where they wrote below the photo, and I love what it says on that. And as we're trying to just reopen this case and look at all the documents and all the evidence there, the recordings and the photographs and all that, to have those photographs with them written upon was so helpful to answer or fill in some of these gaps that we didn't really have the correct information on. So I don't know if you have that picture there that you could show of Lady and Sheba after Snippy's death, and it has the words underneath the photo. And I would like to share that if you have it.
let's see. Is that the one where the horses, where you see them from the back?
Yeah, and his tail's like tucked under. Is probably that one. I kind of sent you these last minute. I apologize. I should have done it sooner.
Well, and when honestly, I was a little concerned about how we were going to go about Well,
I know,
that and
even the book cover, it's hard to get it advertised because of the graphic nature of the cover, they won't allow us to run an ad. So we're halfway thinking of having to redesign the cover.
oh
Um,
jeez.
but this was an original drawing from 1967 from the case, so it was kind of neat to put that on the cover and the backs. Those were both original 1967 sketches done from back in the day, so it would be kind of disappointing to have to switch them just for ads, but it is what it is.
Right,
Mm.
exactly. I mean,
But the other thing too that was fascinating about this case, and they had other animals on the King Ranch, and these animals had like signs of radioactivity. Their hooves are growing extra long. They're going blind. And this was reported all throughout this area. So something's happening to these animals, and even humans were experiencing, neurological effects, migraine headaches, blindness. There it is.
yeah,
That's one of the other ones. The other one said, yeah. So this one says Lady and Sheba and Pasture King Ranch, Ellis Richmond foreground. Another one says, like Lady and Sheba, the only witnesses to Snippy's murder. But there's Snippy's mom and them after in the pasture where Snippy was mutilated.
let me see if I can pull that one up. Now that you said that,
Yeah.
I think
There was a whole series of these photos, and they had the photos too of like the fence posts being sheared off, all the holes in the ground, the Chico brushes, everything. So I was just amazed at how well documented this case was, and what a shame to have it go missing all those years, when there's so much to be learned. Like, I just couldn't believe even the box encounter. This was, one evening, and Nellie had a hard time wrapping around all these things that were happening at the time. This place, even to this day, there's no lights. They didn't have electricity. They used two-way radios to communicate. It's still so dark out in this area, and they witnessed something that at first thought was a college prank. The strange hose with this ball of light on it. There were craft corpse, just chasing cars, and so much, just case after case after case of unusual things out there.
yeah, yeah. I think I found the video, the image. I made it really simple for myself. I just titled it "Witnesses."
Yeah. It
Um,
was also really good to have these photos of all the 4 horses that were on the ranch, and they all have different markings on their legs and on their bodies, so it made it much more easy. There it is, that one. Here, that's Mother Lady. Lady, Snippy's mother. These 2 horses, Sheba and Lady, were the horses that were with Snippy in pasture when killed, only witnesses to Snippy's murder.
mm.
Mm. Yeah.
Anyway, and one of the things I want to point out about this is that these Snippy was an early case, like the one that really kind of brought the media's attention to the mutilations.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, there are very big differences between these early cases and the latter cases. There's things that happened in the latter cases that uh, it seems like the things like missing tongues and eyes and stuff like that, and so forth, in the cattle mutilations in particular, um, were consistent and latter events from these here. What's your take on that? How do you feel about how very different these?
Yeah, in some cases that's true, but however, even with Snippy, the blood was drained from this
Mhm.
animal. And what really was kind of interesting to me, oftentimes, we hear things, decades through the years of, commonalities for true animal mutilations that are mysterious. And one of them is that other animals will not approach to eat on them, right? And that was reported even in the Snippy case. And even on that map that you showed earlier, you could see where coyote droppings were around the horse, and you could see animals almost approaching, like here, these little, I can't point to it, but those little arrows with the little droppings, those were but they never approached Snippy. They didn't eat on Snippy. They stayed away. And later in the documents, it stated that eventually when the coyotes did try to eat on them, they died of dysentery. There was also high radiation readings around Snippy, but the closer you got to the horse himself, the radiation readings went down. Another thing that was reported I found fascinating was something we hear about in these strange locations, which is the cone of silence, which I've experienced personally, actually out in Pioneer Town, California. We had a cone of silence experience, but they reported that back in 1967 with Snippy, where everything just was no bugs, no birds, no bees. So all these telltale signs of a true animal mutilation, the cauterization, the blood being drained, animals not approaching, the cone of silence, they were reported in the Snippy case. And that really fascinated me. I'm like, wow. And that was before people knew what to report. It kind of started there, and Dr. Leo Sprinkle was one of the investigators out on this case. And to see old pictures of Leo out there doing his investigations and things, it's really interesting.
Now, when you mentioned the cone of silence, this is one of the things I was talking about in the forum last week. Was one of the things I found very interesting was that in this, as you say, cone of silence, it felt to me almost like a vortex, like just a vacuum of, there was nothing. There was no sound. There was no stirring of air. There was no smell. There was nothing. It was literally void of anything sensory even. And just my impression was walking into a very sterile, almost existent area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to describe it. And you've experienced that, it sounds like.
Oh yeah. When there was some mutilations in South Tennessee back during the 90s that I went to investigate. It was the first time I ever really touched on an investigation for a mutilation. For one reason, same as you're saying, it's like a lot of other people were already doing that. But somebody looked at me and said, hey, I've run across this paper. It was a local paper. It was like one of those 4 or 5, 6-page newspapers from a local area that talked about the mutilations. He said, I know these people. Like, you want to go and check this out? And I went to this, and yeah, it was the weirdest feeling that I've ever experienced. And I've had some pretty crazy experiences, but this one, stepping into that cone there, was just like, it was otherworldly. It was just otherworldly. And one of the things that we experienced and I saw myself, and I think part of that is because the guy that I was with already knew what was going to happen, but there was this flaky substance that we found around part of the wounds, and he, knowing full well, because he'd been on these cases before, picked it up with tweezers and tried to put it in a bag. And the minute that he did that, it turned into a liquid. It went from a flaky solid to a liquid. And when that happened, it was like, to me, it was kind of like, okay, nothing is really going on here, but this thing that he just put this in came from outside this cone. So did that have something to do with the liquefying of the substance that was, we don't know.
Right.
But it was very interesting that something that was a foreign object that touched something like that caused a reaction. I
Right.
found.
Yeah, that was interesting in the Snippy case too, when her Nellie Lewis and Ernest Wellington went over to the Chico bush and found that tool. They described it as like a gizzard-shaped liver, and so Nellie picks it up with a couple of sticks, and pokes at it, and this green paste ooze comes out of it. And I had not heard that before. Like, what the heck is that? And then it burns her hand, and her hand is burning for like an hour until she finally goes back, 4 miles to her cabin and washes her hands. So, what is that about? One of the strangest animal mutilation cases that I did an interview with a woman that grew up in Elbert County and, right by the Rocky Mountain Ranch, her whole family, generational out there. And so she moved to Wyoming, drove to Wyoming to interview about all the cattle they lost back in the day. And right out of high school, so this would have been, late 70s, early 80s, her and her husband moved to Rama, Colorado, which is just right outside of Elbert County. It's right there, right by all the high strangeness and the Black Forest and all that. And her husband was out on horseback checking the cows for calves. She said he came across a dead calf. But what's interesting about this, and what blew my mind too, she has the original photos that she sent me of this. So he approaches a calf, like, what happened to you? 4 incisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, in a perfect square. The top of the fur was removed, but the skin was still there. So he gets on the horse, goes back to the ranch and gets my witness. They come back in the pickup truck. She said that took 20, 25 minutes to come back. That calf had been cauterized, blood drained, organs removed. And she sent me pictures of what a calf looks like. I mean, they're graphic, but when a coyote jumps on it and just tears at it, she said this was miles off the county road. They didn't hear anything. There were no tracks other than what the horse had left earlier. So no footprints, no nothing. They said they felt watched. It was eerie. It could not explain it. It terrified them. That just blew my mind. It's like he came upon this calf during a mutilation, which is really interesting because it was 4 cuts, boom, boom. I don't know if they were lasered, boom, 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 and they were just getting ready and were able to just vanish and then come back and finish the job. But that case really blew my mind. Because it was like they interrupted a mutilation in progress. And then you hear these that are like animals dropped from above, found in trees, like out in Trinidad. Sally and Tom Miller, I went out and interviewed them as well. There's a couple interviews with Tom and Sally Miller on my Rocky Mountain Ranch YouTube channel, and I really got into the high strangeness or hitchhiker phenomenon that they really started kind of talking about in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which is this hitchhiker phenomenon. And I talked to the Millers a lot about that as well, because where I compartmentalized it and connect it back in the day, now I know what it is. It's that hitchhiker stuff. But Millers experienced that as well. And they said something to me really interesting. They said, because I asked them, I said, all these ranchers that are experiencing these animal deaths, are they too experiencing the hitchhiker stuff, the paranormal stuff, all the high strangeness stuff? And she said it's fascinating because it's as if who's ever mutilating these cattle are picking and choosing the ranchers just as much as the cattle or the animals. So where certain ranches, they don't ever get touched, but certain ranches do. And I find that kind of, I don't know if anybody's ever really done a deep dive on that, but I thought that, haven't thought about that one. But they too have the hitchhiker stuff out there in Trinidad.
And what you say rings very true to what I was talking about. Like the area that this event that I went to was at is literally surrounded by farmland. I mean, it's nothing but farmland and little towns all around it. And yet, out of all of these, it's one place. Why the one place? And why the one group of cattle?
Right. Oh, and another thing she said too, she said in the pastures where the mutilations are occurring, the animals are very calm and huddled together as if almost paralyzed or hypnotized or something. And in the adjoining pastures, she said they were freaked out. So there's something to that. And I had a woman come up to me one time and said, do you think, because there have been boxes seen and reported around animal deaths, animal mutations? And are they emitting a frequency or a tone or a hum that's calming these cattle? And I saw the question there, how quickly do you think these mutilations are taking place? Could be a minute or less. I mean, it seems to me like they're happening rather quickly. Obviously, it might take longer to drain the blood, but I don't know. I've also heard, through other researchers that maybe they're interested in the blood because it's high in copper. And if ET or whatever need those types of minerals because they might absorb nutrients through their skin and not ingest it like we do, and maybe they're taking these vital organs, the tongue, the eye, the ear, the genital regions, and the blood to maybe, either make food pills like in the Carl Higdon case, or they're using it and putting it on their skin, and then they just leave the carcass there. That being said, I'm not saying these are ETs and extraterrestrials that are doing this. I don't know. Part of it could be our own military doing that. However, I find that hard to believe also because we don't have a lot of evidence that that's occurring. And early in the day, they thought they were, satanic cults and stuff like that. I think we can pretty safely rule that out. And, I flew to Florida to interview the Bill Waugh was the undersheriff in Elbert County, and he's in Linda Moulton Howe's A Strange Harvest, her movie. But Bill Waugh was the undersheriff. He witnessed the box. He saw a box and a tree go underground, but he was there for all these animal deaths. And in the sheriff's office in Elbert County, they had a map. So every time there was an animal mutilation, which, by the way, NORAD, it said the Air Force directive, they had an order to downplay the amount of animal deaths. So they were trying to, because people were just freaking out, arming themselves, like get high alert. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, they're going to go to humans next. I mean, it was crazy. The state governor got involved. The Colorado Bureau of Investigations got involved. It was like a big deal. But anyway, so he has this map in the police station, and he would map like a mutilation happened at this time, this location in Montana. And at the same time, it's happening in Elbert County and, Texas. And I mean, it was clear across the whole Midwest. And I know Chris O'Brien did some work on that, like trying to look at nuclear fallout sites in different locations that maybe they're looking at the groundwater or mad cow disease or all these different theories. But it certainly doesn't answer for how strange some of these things, there's just no answers for some of this stuff.
Right. Pam asked, were there common threads in the ranches that were affected?
Yeah, that's a good question, Pamela. I think that's something that really has been overlooked, and I would love to. Unfortunately, now, since this has been going on for 50 plus years, most ranchers won't report mutilations. So something that happened, having the opportunity to, work with the Beyond Skinwalker team and getting to know some of the ranchers in the area, I've been able to ask, hey, is this still going on? And I've had a couple ranchers now reach out to me. Yeah, our prize $5,500 bull was out in the middle of the day just fine, and come out there and check on him 2 hours later, mutilated. Middle of the day, no helicopters, no people, no trucks, no nothing. So yes, it's still occurring. In fact, his name's Carl. I'll leave his last name out, but he's an older gentleman in his 90s now that had animal deaths in the 70s during the high point of all this. And he still pastures cattle out in Woodland Park, Colorado. So I'm interviewing Carl, talking to him, what do you think they are? Blah, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, for the past 3 4th of Julys in a row, I've had a mutilated cattle in Woodland Park, Colorado. 4th of July. So he gave me the location where this is occurring, which is by Red Rock Campground. So we go on location. First of all, 4th of July weekend, right by a campground. This is the busiest time of the year. There's tons of people out there. There's power. They're finding these dead cow, these mutilated cow under power lines. No helicopters are going to go in and out of that area unnoticed. He's not reporting them. I just found out down the road from us in Guffey, there's a rancher that's having mutilations quite frequently, never reports them, doesn't want to. He doesn't want the publicity, the stigma. They know nothing's going to happen. Oftentimes ranchers will just write them off on their taxes. So That's a good question too. Were there higher radiation levels around the area where Snippy was found? Yeah, outside of the area. So there was a 75-foot diameter circle at the Snippy location, which also was fascinating to me because of the famous landing site at Beyond Skinwalker in the APRA reports was 75 feet in diameter. And then, if you watch Investigation Alien with George Knapp, they're talking to ranchers in Oregon that are having mutilations right now. And there was a 75-foot in diameter circle found there as well. So there's something to the 75-foot diameter circle. Not only was the radiation readings higher, but it was like reverse. So when they got closer to Snippy, the radiation readings dropped. They went lower instead of higher, where it should be opposite. So there's something to that. It's really interesting. Yeah, I do believe that. Somebody asked, do I think that whatever the bipedal creature was traveling through? Yeah, possibly. I think there's something underground. And even I think at Skinwalker Ranch, there was reported, they're looking through their professional night vision goggles and they see something open and this creature come out of it. I'm sure something like that might be happening at Rocky Mountain Ranch as well.
So one of the things, and Pam kind of hinted on this too, and you kind of brought this question, inevitable, I guess not question, but bit of the puzzle into play by mentioning the possibility of humans being next. There are actually reports of humans that have been found to be victims of mutilations,
Yep.
very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
they're horrifying to see. They're so graphic. There's one in particular, I won't get into it, but it's burned into my brain now. And I kind of wish I never saw it because, this woman was in her seatbelt in her car and it was very similar to a cattle mutilation. And I'm just was horrified to see that. It's scary. It's really scary. Fortunately, we don't hear a lot about that, but then again, there's a lot of people that go missing. It makes you wonder. I hope that's not the case.
Well, and it's very interesting the strange cases of just people literally vanishing from without a trace, seemingly like at night a lot of times and so forth. Sebastian Rogers is a big case here in the Nashville area of a young boy who went missing from his home in the middle of the night, not just last year. Was it last year? I think it was just a few months ago.
You couldn't imagine.
Yeah, still no clue whatsoever what happened there, and there's been no evidence at all. And the area that he lived at was in the metro area of Nashville, so it wasn't off in the middle of nowhere. There had to be Ring cameras around. There had to be something around that could have picked up evidence of something, and yet there's no evidence. This child just vanished. So when it comes to the missing people aspect, it does make you wonder, is there a connection with all of this?
Yeah, right. I know for a lot of people, like this is I hate to use that term dark side of ufology, but it's pretty scary. It's frightening. It's graphic. It's hard to take a look at. And we can't really ignore that that's happening, and it continues to happen. And what's surprising to me, getting to, meet some, Paul Sinclair in the UK and the work that they've done out there, and to learn, there are like a whole rash of like kangaroos. I've heard of even sea creatures, sheep. There's articles about dog. So it's not just cattle. So I think Christopher O'Brien was right when he coined, animal deaths in Linda as well. So yeah, it's a part of this whole phenomenon that is just kind of unnerving to say the least, and it continues to this day. I don't know other what other to say about it than that? And I do hope though that more people start reporting them again, because we can't just ignore it and put it under the rug. We got to look at it.
Right, right. And there is so many other things that we could connect on and talk about in relation to all of this. Um, one of the things I would like to do is to bring you back on to discuss some of the other things that we didn't even touch tonight because there's so
Yeah,
much.
there's so much. There's I would love to talk to you more about the whole military aspect of things and the FOIAs and the interceptors and all this the MK Ultra side of things. I'm kind of going down. I've been led down that rabbit hole more and more and more just recently. So this is a whole other area, and I think it certainly plays an important role, at least to a few different areas, and possibly even the Miller Ranch in Trinidad, because there's a whole Army military training base out there. But we certainly can't overlook the military, NORAD, Air Force, MK Ultra connection to some of these locations. And then there's also the other part, which is equally important too, and that's our role as experiencers and how we interact and manifest some of these things to occur as well. And that kind of gets into the occult practices and all that. So there's so many moving pieces to these high strangeness locations that involved the actual unknown, the military, government, MK Ultra, and then our own interactions as well, and the earth. So you have to add all of these together. And that's why, as curious people, that's why there's so many podcasts about this, because there's a lot to unravel and a lot to really discover with all of this, with both paranormal and UFOs, cryptids. They're all tied together somehow. Maybe we're in a matrix, and but to me, that's the best. I'm like, I love that theory. Thomas Campbell's theory of the big toe, that explains everything. Okay, I'll go with that one.
It's very difficult to when you talk about these things. Like I've been trying for a decade now to put enough of thoughts together to start a series of books on the different things that I've discovered and believe to be true on all of this, because I've been doing this, and literally I was an experiencer from, gosh, if I really wanted to try to pinpoint it, probably 5 or 6 years old forward. And so it's been a lifetime of insanity. And you, in that time period, you kind of start to build some thoughts on it. One thing I do want to ask you before we round out the night, because this is kind of a thing. There's schools of thought, a growing school of thought on the internet now, is that somehow all of this goes back to one word, the Nephilim. What is your take on that? What's your thought on that?
Meaning like the Watchers and the Anunnaki and the ancient alien theory. I'm guilty of watching several seasons of Ancient Aliens, and I think there's some really important work there and clues. Ancient art, ancient artifacts, Graham Hancock and the work they do. Like I said, even the occult and Tim Hogan and the work they do. So thank goodness we have podcasts and internet and ChatGPT and Grok and all these places now that's really opening. I mean, I'm tying together, and we can talk about this next time, a program that I was put into in the Denver Tech Center during my ranch years with Thomas H. Badinsky. And thanks to, ChatGPT and things, I can type him in and learn about this guy in the program I was in. And find out he was worked on the SR-71 Blackbird out of Area 51, was read into Black Access Projects, which later worked with the Monroe Institute and the Stargate program and the Gateway Project. It's a long story, and we'll have another episode about all this. But that also plays a role in this. I'm like, it's blowing my mind. But we wouldn't have this information without the things we have now. That can just look really quickly at the data in the internet and put it together for us. That's why these older cases are really going to come into play now. Just like the Snippy case, where I thought it was, a sad, sad story of the first animal mutilation horse, not knowing all the other connections, and now we're able to go back and tie all these places and people and experiences together. So it's just, I really do believe we're going to have more answers in the next few years, thanks to AI. And I've always been kind of one of those, I don't, because I'm a little bit older, old school. I don't want to merge with AI. I was always very fearful of AI, but it is a great tool right now. It's been a great resource. So
It has been a great resource. It helps me out a lot with a lot of things right now.
yeah.
Case in point, trying to do thumbnails and so forth like that, even for the podcast, which I'm finding more and more trying to develop all of that earlier than and in different and better ways than what I was doing at one time. Is very helpful. But then, like you said, just the amount of knowledge. Can you still hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, for some reason I went dark here for a second, audio wise, and I was like, wait a minute. I lost my train of thought now too.
Oh, the
Interesting.
benefits of the thumbnails and things yeah, I agree. I love that. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but like I literally just went in tonight and said to ChatGPT, I said, "Do you know who IKatie Paige is?" And it immediately pulled up this large thing. It was like I didn't even have to specify which IKatie Paige. It knew exactly what I was looking for because I've worked with it enough now. It knows what kind of material
UFOs,
I do. Yeah, and so there was this overwhelming amount of stuff that ChatGPT pulled up right away, and I was like, okay, so now I've got a whole book that I need to read just on this one answer question. But it's very beneficial. It's very beneficial.
Yeah.
We are definitely going to have you back. There are so very many things I want to go over with you and ask about dealing with just all the things. I mean, you are literally a university of questions and answers and knowledge and experiences, and it is definitely worth folks understanding and hearing and learning about if they're interested in anything with paranormal, ufology, all the things.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I'd be happy to do that. Certainly, all of these different phenomena just pulls us in so many directions. And when you're an experiencer like yourself and so many thousands of other people out there, whether it's paranormal or cryptids or UFOs, like I said, I think they're all intertwined, all interconnected. I think we all play a role in that. I love the direction now of the telepathy tapes and opening up the psi stuff. I think that's connected as well. And this will just tug you. It'll lead you down so many different roads. And I guess my advice to people is really follow that path. I mean, I don't believe in, there's no such thing as coincidence, right? So if you really open the door to really learn and understand what's happening in your own experiences, it'll kind of guide you down and help you along, whatever it is, whether you call me your spirit guides or angels or loved ones or whatever. And I've done that on my journey. And I love that magical journey. It is. And it guides you down and just follow those interests and passions. And really, it's so hard now. I mean, we talked about the benefits of AI, but there's also the downfall of AI, which there's so much information out there now. I feel like we're all getting overwhelmed and we don't know what's real. You see a video, and my first, now I see something, I'm like, oh, it's fake. It's fake. I'm more of a skeptic than people think. I really am. I'm kind of jaded when it comes to believing, what the military has to say or our government has to say, because they've been keeping secrets for 70 some years about this topic. Why are they
Now,
What are they going to tell us now that I'm going to believe is the truth? I'm a little jaded that way. So, and I say that to all your listeners, especially your younger ones, learn some of your history, really do some research, and don't take everything as truth, because there's a lot of cover up still going on when it comes to this topic. And it's not all about the UFOs and alien cover up. It's about some truths with maybe some dark projects that they had in the past they don't want exposed. And even in Elbert County, I'm learning about drug contraband and other things that were going on that are nefarious. And they're like, yeah, it's UFOs look that way, why they're doing something over here that they don't want you to look into. So there's a lot of messy stuff going on. So just follow your passions and your interests, and let your intuitive sides kind of guide you that way.
wow. And you really just drove home the question I usually ask to close out the night is what closing thoughts do you have? I'm going to go in and close this out for the night. If you'll hang back for just a moment, I will talk with you in just a moment then.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, and thanks everybody who's listening.
Thank you again. I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight.
No problem.
We appreciate you. Okay, guys, there you have it. There's a lot to digest there. I apologize for the graphicness of the content tonight. You guys know, though, there are times when we're going to be touching on some stuff that is not always warm and fuzzy and friendly. So just be aware. And if you made it this far and you watched the host show tonight, leave me a comment on what you think about the animal mutilations. Do you think there's a point to it all? Obviously there is. What do you think that point is? Do you think it's alien, government, some kind of weird, wacky cult that has a lot of really great technology? What's your thoughts on it? Leave me a comment below. Meanwhile, you guys have a good, safe weekend. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And may your journey always be magical.
I've waited for so long to see when you come back to me. Through the wars and battles that were lost, we're born again, it's you and me. The rest is history. Past lives. Past lives. Did we dance together on different floors in 1500 or 1504? We must have been lovers, we must have been something in our past life.